We are live. Can you put that at the beginning?
Yeah, let's do it.
Hey, everyone.
Are we here already?
Happy Monday.
We are here.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday, everybody.
So,
welcome to Let's Talk Poly, because it is with Andre and Tara.
Yes.
But it's Monday live, as usual, at 11 a.m. 11 a.m. always happens at this time.
It does. At least in our time zone.
In our time zone, yes.
Yes, Eastern Daylight Time. That's where we come live every week. Right. But we also always post the replay in the group.
That's true. In the guides.
Well, if you're joining us for the first time, I feel like we do this every week. Yes, most of the replays are in the guides. Mm-hmm. Actually, all of them. But if you want to find this week's easier, you can go to the announcements, and that usually that has our welcome video, but also the latest live. We always post it there as well. The
guides, or you could follow your way about it. So I feel like at times I create more resistance for myself than is necessary. And is that part of my self-destruction? Is it part of like some resistance that I'm forming? Why not make it easier and go about life in an easier way? And sometimes we're not necessarily aware of how we're creating our own resistance, right? We're not aware of our own limiting beliefs. We're not aware of the things that we're putting in our way as obstacles. When, in fact, when we talk to somebody else about it, when we hear it, we might say, oh, so there's an easier way. So my talking to you about this, I became more aware of the resistance that I'm creating for myself and that there might be an easier way. So you're already a very effective coach in that way.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, that's a good segue. I wanted to share, I had a great, we actually spent the weekend apart this weekend.
That's why I look so refreshed.
Oh man, I don't know what that says about me.
Just the opposite, actually. I think I look like I was out partying too much.
I know. I have something going on with my eye. So that's why I'm wearing glasses today. If you looked at my eye close up, it looks like someone kind of punched me. I have something going on, some sort of infection.
Really?
Ew, gross.
So I wasn't
TMI. What did you do this weekend while I was away? Well, the cat was away. Did you play?
You would think I would, right? I had all kinds of wonderful fantasies, but in actuality, no, I didn't have. Well, it depends on what you mean by play, but no, I hung out at the beach a couple times. I went and visited my father and my best friend, one of my best friends, my best friend. But I went to the beach yesterday, and I was actually speaking to quite a few different people about today's topic of bisexuality. And I wanted to get their take on it and what it meant for them and what their ideas about it were. And it's interesting. And it seems as though, surprisingly or not surprisingly so, that not everybody shares the same idea or definition about bisexuality.
Huh.
Right?
Imagine.
So, which is one of the cornerstones, one of the tenets of our philosophy, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that we would communicate everything, right? So, I say I love you, you say you love me, but what does love mean? What does love mean for me? What does it mean for you? I like to be, this, that, or the other thing. I like yellow. Well, how do you see yellow? How do I see yellow? So we might not know, we might assume, but we'll never really know until we find the words to express and convey what it is we're thinking and feeling.
Yeah.
So I had one idea of what it might mean to be bisexual, and they might have had another one, but we created a dialogue and we might come to have a better understanding of what it is.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay, I'm looking forward to hearing a bit more of that as we go along. So, so we'd love to hear about your comments. We want to make this a dynamic discussion today. So thankfully, we're just going live in one group so we can see your comments in the broadcast, and we both also have our phones. So we're seeing them if we're not responding to them because, anyways,
or if we look distracted. It's not just a fly in the room.
Not just the fly. Yeah, so we want to know what you think and ask questions if you want us to talk about something. We're going to, the other thing I want to tell you is you put a fun poll in the group.
I did.
Yeah, so about
having sex and the frequency of sex. So the article that I was reading came up with a study, and there, it supports other studies of this nature that also suggest the same thing, that while we are wanting to have sex, and we believe that sex is good for us on many levels. It makes us feel connected. It releases endorphins. There's a whole bunch of things. The study found that even if we increase the frequency, the amount of sex in a week, say, for example, it does not necessarily automatically indicate that we're going to be happier doing it. But then if we're not having that amount of sex, do we feel as though we're less happy? So I was asking the group, what is their preferred frequency of sex? And well, it'll spawn other questions and dialogue.
Awesome. So that's in the group, but we're going to post another poll because we are doing a bit of an alphabet series. So last week we did A is for anorgasmia, and we talked a bit about that. Today we're talking B is about bisexuality, but C there's a lot of awesome
there's so many A's and B's too, but
there is, yeah.
But we want to get it's an invitation in the poll to suggest what you might want to consider that we talk about as far as the letter C goes. Right?
So what are some fun C words?
Wow. Fun C words? I think of cunnilingus.
Yes.
But consent can be a lot of fun as well, right?
Yeah.
When we feel as though we are granting our consent or receiving it from somebody else, that might be a lot of fun. And also feeling as though we're able to securely take back our consent might make us feel as though we are secure to go out and play for the consent that we do grant. So consent's a fun one as well. Okay.
Yeah.
What do you got?
Oh, communication. Although we have talked a bit about communication already, but there might be a specific thing around communication somebody wants to talk about. So yeah, those are a couple of ideas. So we'll put that up maybe tomorrow, and would love to hear from you. And then we'll prepare and we'll come to you live next week at this time. On C is for question mark. Awesome. Oh, I remembered what you.
C is for question mark.
Yeah, C is for to be announced.
Okay.
I remember what you said something about impact play, and I remember, so this weekend, one of the things we did, and I actually do this in my
Impact play?
No, we did not do impact play.
Like, wow, this is getting
no,
juicy.
it wasn't that kind of weekend. But we did actually talk about squirting and G area stuff. So that was kind of fun. Like I always love talk. I always bring things to sex.
Yeah. You're a bit of a sexpert, so you could definitely, inform and demonstrate on.
I've learned a few things, and we've learned things together.
Yeah.
It's fun to learn things together, actually.
So
we're like totally going off topic.
We are going
like
off
it's
topic.
okay.
So let me ask you, when you're talking about that, are you referring to the area as the G spot or the G area?
I said G spot, but I like to correct it to be G area because it's not just one spot, and on people it varies, and it's in a different area. Yeah. So if you've experienced someone who's female identifying with a vulva or vagina, whatever you want to call it, if you might realize that it's in different spots if you put your hand in or whatever, and that sort of thing. So it's a G area.
It makes me think, like, why have a G spot when you could have a G area?
Exactly,
like,
that too. Oh, sorry.
Open it up, right? Well, it's interesting because we were also talking about the P spot.
Ah, the P spot.
Yeah.
You were talking about that yesterday?
I try to talk about it as often as possible. I think we spoke about it a bit on Friday and yesterday. Yeah, but how many men may not be that well, and women, whoever, many people may not be all that familiar with or well acquainted with their P spot.
So what's the P spot for people who don't know what that is?
Well, P would be the prostate, right? So if you have a prostate, you might be able to stimulate that and have great pleasure in that. So it's a lot of fun. Maybe when P comes up, we'll talk about P spot when P comes up.
Actually, let's remember that. Oh, Wendy's writing, squirting is one of my favorite topics. Well, any kind of orgasm, actually. That's awesome.
Oh, but that's
Don't forget the A spot. Oh, it's the A spot.
We'll talk about that later. But that's interesting. So I know of some people who will make a differentiation between their orgasm and their squirting.
Yes.
Right. So can you say anything about it?
Oh, because I can have really intense feelings and sensations when my G area is being aroused. And it's quite intense, but it's not the same for me as an orgasm. So for me to orgasm, I'd say that I need also clitoral stimulation. But for like a really good orgasm, oh, you said squirting. I totally went on a different topic.
Now you're talking about the different type of orgasms that you might have. Well, that's a great topic as well.
No, I was just going to say that I can't. So having your G spot and your clitoris stimulated gives me a really good orgasm. But squirting, so when I squirt, it's usually because also there's intense. That's why I thought of it. So it made sense in my mind, even though I didn't say it. Now I should have said it. Now I'm blushing. Is that I get. Yes, they're different G area orgasms, not the same as yes. Yeah. So I don't know if I call it a G. For me, not a G spot orgasm. But squirting, when I squirt, it's an intense feeling that causes it, but it's not the same as an orgasm. And in fact, sometimes it's so intense that I can't have an orgasm.
Right. Yes. I've
witnessed that.
Well, so to recap it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds as though you have pleasure in your clitoris.
Yes.
And you might have an orgasm from your clitoris of sorts, if it can be. Right? And then you might have vaginal pleasure, and you might have orgasm through that. And then you might also have G-spot stimulation and have pleasure from that, but it would be more in the way of squirting. So it's not necessarily an orgasm, but it is a squirting thing. Right. Well, I think I've witnessed the same thing, or similar rather, is that I might have a traditional orgasm through my penis, but that through my P-spot, I'll have some different type of sensation, and it may even culminate in ejaculation, but it's not necessarily feeling like a penile orgasm.
So much pleasure.
I know, right? We're such complex creatures. Isn't that wonderful?
It is wonderful. So we did talk a bit of that in addition to limiting beliefs. Some people have a limiting belief that they can't orgasm, or that anyways, there's lots of
that's kind of going back to the anorgasmia, right? How much of it might be physical, how much of it might be mental, and how we are able to affect both of those, right? We can consult a GP and find out, make sure everything is anatomically or biologically, physically okay with us. And then we might be able to speak to a relationship coach or psychotherapist who is able to unpack some of the psychic, mental aspects that might be holding us back from having better orgasm or orgasm to begin with.
Yeah, for sure. So, wow, we kind of went a little bit off topic, but it's
sex does that, though. Sex does that.
I know.
The topic, the conversation of sex it's inspiring. It makes us want to say so much about it.
So we're talking about bisexuality, being bisexual, some of the myths around that. But I think that one of the benefits about being bisexual is that you can have all these experiences. So prior to really realizing, like, to myself or admitting to myself that I was bisexual, queer, like we're going to get into those definitions, I always fantasized about women, never experienced it. And so, so like now that I do, the possibilities are kind of broad. But sometimes I like those experiences, but sometimes I don't. And we're going to get into that, talking about that as well.
Interesting. As you said that, your idea about fantasizing about being with women, I immediately wondered what it's like for myself, but I wanted to find out when you, and if it's too personal, well, let's talk poly, so too bad. But I'm going to ask anyway. So when you're fantasizing about being with other women, do you imagine yourself as being with another woman as another woman, or do you imagine yourself as being with another woman as if you were a man? Because, I'm coming out to everybody. I think I would consider myself to be bisexual, but we'll get into the definition of that. But very often for me, I might be with somebody else. I might even be with a woman, but imagine myself as a woman with another woman. So I'm in touch with my feminine side, and I am being with this woman, doing certain acts with them. Imagine what it's like as if I were a woman. So essentially, I'm feeling as though I am in some ways maybe a lesbian. Whereas if I were with a man, I might come to them as a man, but I might also come to them as a woman. Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, and I love that about you. I love that kind of fluidity about you. I don't think I have the same. Did I cut you off? No. I don't have that same sense myself, but I think there are cases. I think I usually feel like a woman. However, I change I think sometimes when I'm with a woman, I don't necessarily feel more masculine or man-like, but I feel more dominant. Oh, interesting. I take on dominant characteristics that I don't tend to do as much when I'm with someone who is male identifying or man. Right. That's interesting. So the whole sub-dom dynamics, and do we associate automatically that if I'm dom, I'm masculine, and if I'm sub, and yet many of the doms that I know are women. Yeah, there's lots of doms. Right. Yeah. So it's interesting to see how it might. So I just kind of figured that out as we were talking about that. I love these conversations. That's what dialogue does, right? That's why we're wanting to say everything. We come to this aha moment. We come to this clarity, and we might have one idea of how we are, how we want to be. And then through the dialogue, we might gain clarity to that, or might have a different position that and us and say, well, yeah, maybe that's a possibility as well. So just many possibilities. Talk to people, but talk to people that
will support you in what you're doing. I think that's important because sometimes we talk to people because we need to talk to people, but they're not often the ones that are going to support our dreams, or
they may have their own limiting beliefs, right? And they may have their own prejudice and their own thing. So ideally you want to speak to somebody who's supportive and who is well informed and neutral enough to allow you to have your own expression, so you can find out what it is that you're wanting.
Yeah. So I think when I first discovered this, I talked to close friends that that I felt that would be supportive of me and not judge me. I also, when I chose to start moving into this career, I also chose someone to speak to that I knew that would support my dreams, because there's people around me that don't support what I'm doing. Anyways, I digress. So let's go into the definition of bisexual.
Let's talk about that, because that's also going to open up a whole opportunity for orgasm, for conversation as well.
Oh my goodness. Oh, Drang is saying there's whole body orgasms. I love that this shifted into orgasms, but that's all good. We love it. So I want to thank Michael Moore for posting in the event. He posted a link to the Bisexual Resource Center, which had some really great definitions of being bisexual. Right. So being bisexual, attraction to more than one gender. So this attraction can be physical, romantic, or emotional. Right. So bisexual people may experience different kinds of attractions to different genders, and their attractions may change over time. Sure. And I think that's important to repeat. They may change over time, and even if they change, that doesn't mean that you can't say that you're bisexual. And I think we're going to talk a bit more about that later. Yeah, and
as far as saying that you are, saying that you're not, I think it really comes back to, how do we want to describe ourselves, regardless of what Webster's dictionary says about it, whatever. What resonates with you, right? It's self-expression. Yeah, it's wanting to announce our position, what it feels like for us. And I might feel this way on Tuesday, but who knows what Monday or Thursday is going to bring, right? So I'm free to edit and deduct any part that I want.
Yeah, and I think you could still say you're bisexual, even if you have a preference towards one gender or the other. And I think that's cool. Absolutely. I think that's something I struggled with at first, is that, I can't say I'm bisexual because it should be even. And I don't think that that's the case. I don't think it has to be. It's what you're comfortable with, and what, if you want something to identify yourself as, what term best fits for you. So there's some others that fit under, there's another term called bisexual plus, which is meant to be a bit more inclusive. So an umbrella term that includes anybody who has attraction to more than one gender. So it has more than one label. So there's various other identities that kind of fit under the idea of bisexual or bisexual plus. I'm not sure if I get the difference between bisexual plus and bisexual, but is it important? I don't know.
It depends if you're writing your dissertation on it, I suppose.
So there's some other terms. So we have a few other terms that you might identify with more. So did you want to share some of those?
Yeah, but before we do,
go ahead.
I just wanted to say the idea that in this definition of what it means to be bisexual or not, right? So in the original part, we said the attraction to one or more genders, right? The attraction could be physical, romantic, and or emotional. But in reading about this, in researching about it, so much of this seems to be, here is myself, right? I perceive of myself, and then how do I relate sexually, as though it goes outward. And it does, and it can be, and that's part of our definition, how we may find ourselves physically, romantically, or emotionally attracted to others. But that's my world going outward. But my world going inward, how do I perceive of myself? And some people might say, well, that's your gender identity.
Yes, right? Your gender expression, or
we
had this whole conversation.
Right, exactly. But it's, even regardless of how I may interact with other people, whether I present as hetero and sometimes have tendencies or whatever the constitution is, how do I perceive myself? So in my case, I often feel very connected to what I will call my feminine side, and I will represent it, but it is regardless of how I might interact with other people outside. So my own expression of it, when the doors are closed, it's not, I'm thinking I feel this way or that way, or I'm attracted to this way or that way towards the others. It is introspective. It is how I feel of myself, regardless of who I am that way.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's not the expression outwards, but it's the feeling inside.
Right, so it's both. It's bi.
Both, yeah.
It's bi, both in and out, feeling both those ways. Because many of the definitions that we have come across have, well, how do you relate to the other? And
Right.
that's going to define your thing.
Oh, that's
So
interesting.
yeah, so again, it might
And I think
come-
that was some of your beach debate too, right?
Well, it was. So one of the people that I was speaking to, I asked them what they thought bisexuality was for them, and they said, well, you would have an ability to be attracted to both men and women at the same time. But it was for them an emotional attraction and a romantic, a psychic thing.
Yeah.
So even if you
Were
were
there some
to,
action associated with it too?
well, if you were in their estimation, if you were simply demonstrating sexually, it was more about being bi-curious.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So if you're not emotionally, romantically there, you're not really bi.
Oh,
for them.
that's interesting.
Yeah. And yet,
So they were trying to apply their own label to you, particular, right?
Perhaps so. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to talk a bit about that too, a little bit more. But
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Mhm.
It's so interesting talking to people about that. And what can I ask? Do you know what they identify as?
They identified primarily as homosexual, as gay.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And it's interesting because
Knowing
then,
who you talked to, I didn't think that was the case. I thought that they were bisexual.
oh, interesting. Maybe we're not thinking of the same person. But what's interesting, though, and this is a little bit of a side thing, and maybe we cover this later on in the chat, but how are bisexual people received in different camps?
Yes, we are talking about that a bit more.
So then we'll hold off of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's get into a few more of the definitions.
Oh, yeah.
Is that
so,
okay?
So the definition, well, it's going to be okay. So some of the other identities that we might have
That might
come across.
Fall under the umbrella of bisexual.
And there's one that says switch, which I think is
Oh,
possibly,
she said,
but that's in the dom.
yeah, she
sub.
said, yeah, I think I'm a switch instead of identify as sub or dom usually, but I agree with that statement here. I feel the same way with male versus female. Okay.
Right. So can we switch our identities like that also, right? Can I be
Sure.
sometimes, lesbian, sometimes gay, hetero? I mean, it depends. So can I identify as lesbian because I identify with my feminine side? So it sounds perverse, right? Perhaps. But if I am, here it goes, if I'm going down on a woman, I am sometimes feeling and seeing myself as a man going down on a woman, and sometimes feeling and seeing myself as a woman going down on a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me feel very complete and very like two different polarizations, two different extremes, but yet I'm all within me, but in tune with those different parts.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes me feel bisexual. I have a male sexuality and a female sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
Female identity and a male identity,
Mhm.
and they come together and I feel bi.
Yes, and can I also say that sometimes you like to dress in a way that's more considered feminine or female
Sure.
or womanly, and that's another expression.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that ties in. When you're dressing like that, are you embodying also that feeling inside of feeling more feminine?
Yeah, at times, well, sometimes I feel like I'm very het and I'm dressed in women's clothes, so that might make me feel more like a transvestite. But there are other times, yes, when I am dressing or appearing as a woman and feeling transgender and feeling like that. Yeah, so it's quite interesting. We have so many different facets to ourselves. But let's go back to the
Okay.
to the identity certificate. We'll get that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So some of the other identities when considering bisexuality that might fall under this umbrella of bisexual terms are when people announce themselves to be fluid, right? They are a person with dynamic sexuality that might change. That's very much what we're talking about. And it might change not only over time, but even in immediate situations. So depending on who we're with, we may find ourselves being rather fluid, that we are able to change in a very short amount of time. It needn't be over a long period of time.
Yeah.
It might, we might be, for example, at a play party or at a club, and depending from one scene to another, we may have different expressions that way, right?
Yeah.
Omnisexual, people who are attracted to all genders.
Yeah, so that can be a wide range. So not necessarily just, I think, male, female identifying, but also like the whole range, non-binary, transgender, like all of them.
Pansexual is the attraction to all genders regardless of gender. This attraction can be physical, romantic, and or emotional.
Yeah, so I think we debated this one to see how similar it was to omnisexual.
Right.
And we were debating whether or not there's like what's the nuance? And I think all of these things have a bit of nuance. That one even more so. Like sometimes I think people who say that they're pansexual or they identify as pansexual, they'll say that they don't see the gender.
Right.
You know.
And we were wondering, we were debating philosophically, how can you not see somebody's gender?
Yeah.
And some people feel that they are very much able to do that, and other people question whether or not it's possible at all.
Yeah,
So
I'd love to
if you-
see if anybody
love to
thinks
see your
about
comments
that.
about it, right? And then there's the word queer.
Oh, I love the word queer.
I love the word queer too. What does that mean? It's an umbrella. Well, go ahead.
It's also an umbrella word that has a whole wide variety of people across the spectrum of sexual orientations and gender identities. So both sexual identity and gender identities. So someone may identify as queer when it's something other than straight or cisgender. Yeah,
it's interesting that you, is that it?
No. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people may say that they're also queer.
Yeah. So in some ways for me, it seems as though it's taken on this other encompassing way that when I say that I'm queer, when people say they're queer, it just means I'm not part of that heteronormative thing, right? So I'm somehow, forget about my sexual expression. Exactly. I'm not of that old school norm where it's going to be in that cookie cutter kind of deal, right? That I'm not rigid. I am rather fluid in that way, that it's undefined or there's subtleties or nuances to it. It seems more inviting, more encompassing, more incorporating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
That's my understanding.
And then did you add this bigender?
I did.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, some of my research that went into bigender, and that's a great term too. It's an individual's gender identity. A person's sense of one's own gender may be described as androgynous if they feel they have both masculine and feminine aspects, which I went on to think, well, for me, that's more about the outward physical appearance or demonstration of. So when I think of,
is that also bisexual? Are you saying? Because we're talking about these terms as part of being bisexual, but I guess it can be included under that umbrella.
But it doesn't necessarily have to automatically be, right?
Yes,
so
exactly.
When I think of in my own limiting, limiting definitions, when I think of somebody who's androgynous, I think of like David Bowie, for example. At some phases in his life, he was kind of gender bending, right? And we couldn't really tell if he was male or female, but it really didn't speak anything of his sexual displays or physical appearance as much. Like it wasn't as defined. It was more nuanced, and it allowed for both those expressions. But it was very much in the physical part of it, right?
Yeah, but didn't David Bowie also demonstrate? Well,
he did, but the idea for me, in my understanding of androgyny very often it is a physical demonstration. It's how it's witnessed by the other as where their sexuality lies. It's that unknown aspect.
But I think bigender is different than androgyny.
Well, that's
looking at your definition. I wouldn't say androgyny is the same as bigender at all.
Well, here's the definition that they give of androgyny. They say masculine and female characteristics in ambiguous form as seen in biological sex, gender identity, or gender expression.
Yeah.
But does it speak enough of the psychic component of our bile or dual sexuality?
There's so many definitions of these things.
There's so many. Well, even looking further, the idea of 52 genders came up, and then that led to 58 genders. So yes, there is so many, and it branches out. I think we're going a little bit off.
That's okay.
It's critical.
The point being is that, I mean, you can use any of these terms, and you can choose which term that you want to use.
Which best describes for you.
Yeah, and you can decide. Yeah, you can decide the definition of it, and that's why you said earlier, these are things that are important to communicate to partners, especially in new situations, because people may make assumptions based on that, and so we know what assumptions do.
But even for our own, but I think even for our own well-being, yes, it's great to communicate to others and the partners who might help us to find like-minded people or people we identify with. But even for our own awareness, right? So, I'm brought up to think that I am lesbian or hetero male or whatever it is, and yet I have these other facets, these other aspects of me that come up, and I'm not quite sure where they fall, what I should place them as, because maybe they don't fit so well into those definitions. But by becoming better acquainted with it, by having dialogue about it, I might be able to come to better terms of who am I? How do I feel about it? And who am I today? But I am vocalizing it to myself to begin with, and then to others to gain that clarity and acceptance, that self-acceptance, and then acceptance of others and self.
Do you find with people you work with that this does come up for them, this idea?
Yeah, very much so. In fact, I think people start to get this awakening, and they start to experience feelings that they might not have before. They start to look at their relationships and their aspects of identifying, and they're not quite sure what to make of it necessarily in the beginning. And that's where we're able to explore that and find out where it fits for them.
Yeah, I think sometimes people apply judgments to them too, based on where what their upbringing was, some of their own, all that baggage we have, and so it's hard when you realize these things,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right on. I mean, our culture, our religion, a lot of things have told us that we're not able to be this way, right? And it's interesting because I think religion might have some of that. Some organized religions might say, well, it's okay if you're heteronormative, but if you're gay or queer or lesbian, that's not as permissible. But through the work and efforts of a lot of our ancestors, it's become much more acceptable. But one of the last domains, two of the last areas remain to be people who are polyamory and people who are bisexual. Bisexual is thought of as the invisible sex now, right? It is the least. So it goes back to that idea of, different camps. How do they receive people who are bisexual? So when I go into my gay camp with my gay friends, a lot of them assume I'm gay, and then when they find out that I'm bi, they might be, are you a tourist here, or like, what is it that you're wanting? Are you here for some kind of secondary gain or whatever it is? And it's interesting the expression of it, how it's received.
Yeah, I actually I wasn't with the beach this time, but I was over one time when I was there. I was walking to the bathroom. I was walking behind two male identifying people, and they were having a conversation apparently about a guy that was with the other, and they were being critical of him because they're like, oh yeah, he's like one of those guys, they just want to they just want to be fucked, and like that's not real anyways, and they were kind of dismissing this person and their desires, and I found that I really wanted to like ask them, but I just was like, I'm just gonna sit back.
What would you have asked them?
I don't know. It's like, what would you have them do? You know what I mean? Like what,
Well, like, what would you have them do to prove that they are?
Like what, I don't know. Like, what does it matter? Like, apparently it mattered to them, and it can matter, and it's fine if it matters. But they were being it sounded like they're being very judgmental of this person. They said like, oh, he has a girlfriend, so whatever kind of thing. So they dismissed him as a bisexual person because he had a girlfriend.
So he's not really going to be eligible in some ways.
Yeah, in some ways. Anyways.
Interesting.
So we kind of covered a bit of this, but I wanted to talk about, because when we first decided we were going to talk about this topic, you talked about Freud and Freud's beliefs.
Right. Well, I had to check my readings, and there is a disconnect because it was written in German and then translated poorly or otherwise. But it was my understanding early in my training that Freud suggested that we were all bisexual because we were made up of so-called male and female aspects of it, things that we assigned those different traits. So we were inherently bisexual, and that we would develop into hetero or homosexual.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But again, that kind of negates the actual bisexuality.
Yes.
And it's like, well, you're going to either be this or you're going to be that. But to be both would somehow be perverse or not psychically or erotically mature yet, which I don't think is the case. So I had my first interaction with somebody of the opposite sex around the same time that I had my first interaction with somebody of the same sex. And that happened many, many, many years ago.
Very early. For you.
And I think that it would no longer fit as a curiosity, but more as my position.
Yes.
So there's no bi-curious to it. For me, it is how I am. So I don't think it's a question of my being psychically or emotionally or sexually immature. It is my position, my preference, my orientation.
And I think at the time when Freud started talking about this, people would have laughed and said that they didn't agree with him. Right. There was a lot of conversations. But I think you were just doing a bit of research when we were preparing for this about a recent study from Cornell University. Because so this might be controversial, and love to hear if you agree or disagree with this, but tell us a bit about that.
Right. So the recent study from Cornell University showed that sexually diverse, so in the study, they showed sexually diverse porn to a group of people, and despite calling themselves heterosexual, it was shown that the participants, showed sexual stimuli for the same gender they identify with. In other words, they were becoming sexually aroused, even though they presented as hetero, they were being aroused by homosexual displays, right? And that that study came to the conclusion that heterosexuality is an acquired trait, which kind of goes back to that evolutionary aspect of it. So we're born bisexual, but we might acquire these things. So it's controversial, right?
Right, because I think sometimes people will, I think I started off as fantasizing about women, and it might be something that stays in fantasy that you never want to act upon. Right. So then the question is, are you bisexual if you just fantasize about it? Or can, and again, I think you can decide how you want to identify.
Well, sure. So it's the same though, like if you were presenting as heterosexual, you're a straight guy, and all of a sudden you sleep with a man, so now you are automatically gay.
Yeah.
I don't think it works that way.
No,
you are somebody who might engage in certain activities or refrain from those certain activities, but that doesn't necessarily indicate how you self-identify, right?
Yeah. Awesome.
Where are we?
I think you talked a bit about the beach, but we can talk about, you talked a bit about also your feeling state, how you feel psychically without the sexual erotic component of things. Like you were saying about, not just the gender you were assigned at birth, but something different.
Right. But it's interesting. As we say this, it occurs to me that it seems rather accepting and acceptable today that I might express myself as bisexual in my sexual demonstration. So when I was a kid growing up, guy on guy was like, ew, that's gross, right? And it went on from there. There were all kinds of derogatory things said, and we know the treatment of gay people. But then in that immature psychic way, it was okay for boys to like girls to be with girls, because that was considered,
still today,
even today. And yet a lot, as we know, a lot of female presentation with when guys are involved is very performative. Thank you. Right. There's this demonstration. They feel as though they have to because the guys want it, whatever the considerance. But all of these, and then now, male on male is becoming more accepted, and the people that I know they're not only accepting of it, but they might actually very much enjoy it, like it, whatever, and okay, freedom to everybody. But in all of these circumstances, all these situations, again, it is primarily, from my experience, the demonstration of the physical and the sexual part going outward. But I'm not as invited yet, not as comfortable yet, not as familiar, not as hearing from other people their own self-expression of how they feel, regardless of what it's like for them outside. How do we identify with our own sexual aspects? So do I feel comfortable announcing to myself as masculine or feminine? And how do I come to be more familiar with that? How can I make that fluidity more recognized, more announced, if I'm so wanting to?
Well, Drang is saying in I'm going to pronounce it wrong, Vajrayana Tantra, they strive to balance out both sides of ourself, which for most is an inside-only adventure.
Right. Fantastic. That's right to what we're saying.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So now just to talk about some of the things that bisexual plus people face in life. And we touched on a few things, but one of the things was invisibility.
Oh, yes. Well, I think that goes under the whole umbrella of biphobia.
Yes, biphobia. So, well, no, different.
Okay,
so biphobia is definitely a thing, and but invisibility is sometimes people who are bisexual feel that they have to put on this invisibility cloak of your appearance of being straight and getting by, and but not being seen, getting by and not being seen. So it can be a heavy burden for people that you feel that you need to be invisible. Right,
but that for me goes under the idea of being biphobia. If we had more acceptance of it, if it was more commonplace, we might not feel as though we're invisible or need to be invisible.
For sure, but biphobia is a prejudice or hatred towards bisexual people, and it's pretty common. Like I'm surprised, like what the numbers show. So it can include making jokes or comments based on myths and stereotypes to undermine the legitimacy of being bisexual.
Yeah, people say it's a phase.
It's a phase, or you're being greedy. Right. And it occurs, what's interesting is that, and you've experienced it, occurs both within and outside of the LGBTQ plus community. So some of our own people, I'm going to say, that may lean more towards one of the ends of the spectrum, and it's not really a right thing, may be judgmental of people who want to float and be more fluid in their sexuality and gender expression.
You know, it just occurs to me as we were saying that, because I'm thinking back to some of the play parties we've had, and if it's made up of male and female, men and women,
male identifying, female identifying.
Okay, we'll
Some
call it
people
that.
like to use the word man and woman because that doesn't assign this.
Right.
It doesn't go to the assigned sex.
So, but if we're in a group, a mixed party where people are very fluid, then I feel more at ease being fluid. But if we're at a play party or a club or whatever, where some of the guys are presenting more in a much more dominant, hetero-dominant phase, I may feel less comfortable revealing my own bisexuality, and that might make me feel marginalized or invisible to some extent.
So what can you do in that situation?
Well, I can assume that they're able to handle their own feelings, and if they need to speak about it, I'm a great listener. I'm loving to talk about things, so we can have dialogue about it. But I might also kind of find myself wanting to make eye contact with them and see what their comfort level is. But I don't want to feel as though I have to be restricting or hypocritical of my position. I want to be able to have my own expression, right? I want to be able to feel as though I am able to be me as they are able to be them. So my consideration for them should not come at the expense of my not being able to express myself, but it is in consideration for them. So sometimes I find myself even going so far as to let the people know, well, there may be, interaction of same-sex people beyond just female-presenting people, and heads up, are you going to be okay with that? How are you going to feel about it? You should think about it.
Yeah. But it's always consent, though. You're not just you're going to ask people.
But what do? Do you ask, like, if you're having a party, do you say, well, is it okay with you if we are going to?
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when you're at the party
of course.
and you want to interact with someone, it's the same thing. You still ask to consent, and people can say no. Yeah. I actually remember being at a party, one of our first parties, and I was with you, and I was with somebody, and you came over because you had been playing with other people and saw me playing there, and I said to the person, I was like, oh, can he also play? And he was like, no. Which is interesting because I honestly believe that person is probably more fluid than they were being at that party, but might have been afraid of what people were going to say.
Right. Well, and some would argue, might they be afraid that it's going to open the door to their, uncovering all kinds of things that they fantasize about, right?
Exactly. So anyways, we're having some comments. Adam's saying, I try not to subscribe to either masculine or feminine in the way I carry myself. I identify as a man. I don't consider myself to be manly. A manly man. Oh, manly man.
It's so interesting because I present in my physical form as very masculine, and I feel very manly, but I also feel very feminine many times.
Yes. Well, you do have a very masculine sort of body, but you do sometimes dress to cover some of that.
It's so interesting. I was having this dialogue with somebody, and they have a female form, but are very much in tune with not wanting to be just seen in this female form. And they went so far as to cut their hair, and they wear clothing that might kind of not emphasize. And I mentioned that as this form that I take, I'm very easily able to shift it simply by allowing my genitalia to fall in between my legs, right? To do a tuck. And it looks, in many parents, you've seen it looks very much as though I have my beautiful vagina, which is pretty cool. Like I can, just like that, shift that. Yeah. This is a very revealing segment.
All right. Good. So we wanted to give some. The other thing people experience is experience erasure. So I think we talked about people assume that you're confused, or you're really gay,
Right.
you're a tourist, like you
Mhm.
said,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
just bi-curious, which is a way of kind of erasing your
Well, yeah,
experience.
it negates my voice. I'm telling you how I feel. I'm like, no, you're just confused, or you're just a tourist, or whatever. It's like they're not wanting to.
And it's really hard. And that's why I think we pulled up some facts, and there's like lots of variations on these facts. But people who identify as bisexual are 6 times more likely to hide their orientation than those identify as gay or lesbian.
Yeah.
Because people know what those are now,
Right.
but 6 times.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I was just thinking about it, right? We live in the so-called gay village, and there are gay bars, and there are lesbian bars. I don't know of too many areas or bars that pronounce themselves to be bi or otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting.
Yeah, and sometimes I find those environments, especially here, are very gay oriented, and so it doesn't. I mean, people are super nice and awesome, but I don't feel seen in them.
Yeah, it's also interesting that occurs to me just now is when I meet somebody on the street, when we meet somebody on the street, do we automatically assign them a sex? Do we like a sexual preference or orientation? Oh, he's gay. Oh, he's straight. Oh, she's lesbian. Oh, she. But how often?
Like they say they have their gaydar or something like that.
But how often do I look at someone and say, oh, they're bi? Well, sometimes, I guess.
Adam's saying it's time to open a bi bar. Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. Bi bar. I like it.
We should call it the bi bar.
Maybe so.
I think I feel like there's one.
There are some places.
Yeah, I think they're harder to find. So the other thing is, another stat is, did you want to read it?
No, go ahead.
44% of bisexual youth report not being able to confide in an adult.
Wow, 44%. So nearly half people who identify as bi are not able to comfortably express that they are bisexual.
Yeah, so imagine being a young person and facing this. I know a friend of mine's daughter, I'm going to say, they did tell their parents, but I think the parents even had a bit of trouble with it. And I think they're still trying to figure it out, because they had a boyfriend, I'm going to say, that really wanted them to transition. They wanted to be with them, but wanted them to transition to being male so that they could be together as a gay couple, which is interesting. And that caused a lot of pressure for them. It's such a complicated situation. It's like, I think it's harder to say that you're bi, and like, how do you tell an adult?
Right. And even healthcare professionals, right? So one third of people do not disclose their bisexuality to their healthcare professionals.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because now there's a shift, right? We were talking about this yesterday as well. So at many sex clinics, they might have in the past, or other clinics might have asked you if you identified as hetero or gay. And now they're simply asking you, do you have sex with men, women, or both? Right.
Yeah. We've disclosed our both being polyamorous and our sexual things. But sometimes when you're with someone new, like I went for the first time to an actual gynecologist last week, and she asked me if I had sex with both male and female. And I was like, I'm used to saying it, but I'm like, yeah, but it still was like, huh. Anyway,
interesting.
Yeah. So a lot of people who are bisexual suffer from anxiety, depression.
Yeah, in fact, there's indication that it might be higher than the population at large.
And I think one of the things we watched a video, they talked about higher suicide rates as well.
Yeah, that's true.
And so, yeah.
Well, because, when it is underground, when we're invisible, when we're marginalized, and we feel we don't have expression to it, then a lot of those feelings are internalized, and they are not met with the therapeutic process, right? So we feel as though we have no place to go to. We're not able to share that expression outwardly. It's internalized, and it may be overwhelming for us. And unfortunately, suicide might look like it's the only option, which it is not. We can always talk about things. It always makes it better.
Yeah. So this is you, like, reach out to somebody you trust and talk about it. Reach out to us. We're here.
Yeah, Tara's a wonderful relationship coach.
And you're an awesome therapist, sex-positive therapist. So, Melinda's saying, I love this. I wish everyone in the world could watch this and feel the same as all of us here watching do. No judgment, willing to hear about what others experience, asking questions. Yeah, wouldn't it be great for everyone to feel comfort with who and how they are openly? Yeah, I love it.
Which is another great part. I see here what you wrote, and I think there's a wonderful thing to introduce right here. The problem isn't being bisexual. It's other people's response to that as a problem.
Yeah. And then how we take that in our bodies, because
Right.
that's the thing. Like, so people can have a problem with anything, but it's how you experience in
Sure.
your bodies. But it makes it difficult
Yeah.
when people respond, because there's some, like, you know, it can feel shameful. Like, you
Oh,
might
without
feel
a doubt.
shameful about
Absolutely, yeah. And you know, it's been a while since I've been out of high school, but I could only imagine what it must be like to be labeled bisexual in school, right? Because very often we get pulled into different camps. They may want you to be one way or not the other, but if you're something that is different, strange, other, sometimes that opens us up to feeling not only alienated, but almost as a target for other people's own insecurities or misconceptions of it.
And I have a feeling around a lot of these things, like sexuality and identity and all that, that the school curriculum hasn't caught up to what it is. And I think that's why we did a great chat with Ashley Robertson, who's a sex ed provider. And it was a great talk. So if you have kids, it's awesome. And she's awesome. And she does a lot of talks about this and how to be. Recently she talked about, you know, talking to your kids about being kinky, like them being kinky, and how to, you know, support them in that. So that's not something I don't think you'd hear in a school for sure.
Maybe not yesterday. Maybe not today necessarily, but tomorrow perhaps.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
When people like her speak out and more of you, like, that's when the shift is going to happen.
Well, yeah. So what happens is we have the dialogue and we get the data, we get the information, and it sheds light on the fears, on the unknown. And then we can say, well, this is for me and this isn't for me, but we are able to at least make that informed decision about it. So,
yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So a few other things, a few other myths and stuff. Just because you have an opposite sex partner, opposite gender partner, it doesn't mean you're not bisexual. You can't be bisexual. You just chose somebody, and you may choose something different at any point.
So nothing's written in stone, right? There's no absolutes.
But people will say that. It's like, well, oh, Tara, you're with a male partner. How could you be bisexual?
Right.
Like, if that's your you definitely have a preference. You're not bisexual, and people have a hard time with this. Yeah. And that's part of the reason we're talking about this today. So one of the other reasons I think that happens is sometimes people begin their journey into open relating because one or both of the people may come out or may want to express desires different than their gendered partner. And that could be whether it's a male-female couple, or like a woman or man, or like a same-sex gender couple. It's so hard. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I'm hoping people will give us grace in understanding that we're trying to use the correct terms.
Yeah, I think making the effort is the big deal. You know, our intention is that we're wanting to be inclusive and considerate. But whether or not we make a misstep and say the wrong word, well, we are human. So.
Yeah, so I think, and I've worked with clients that this has happened, where one person has come out and said, I'm actually bisexual, and they may have hid that because they weren't sure that person was going to accept it. And then they get married, and then they're in this situation. So part of what they wanted to do was open the relationship to allow for this to happen. But then that brings with it like a whole other layer. You may go from feeling very secure in the relationship to the other person feeling like some concern, discomfort, jealousy.
Well, where's it going to leave them? Right?
Yeah, where is it going to leave them?
Sure.
Is this person going to leave them?
Sure.
That sort of thing.
Right.
So, yeah.
But then what's the alternative? That we don't identify and explore and express that?
No, I think we need to. I think, we're inviting you to have those conversations with people. And if you are having a hard time having those conversations or opening up or admitting to yourself even that this is something that you wish to do, then talk to us.
For me, hearing you say that, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's about really trying to get to the point where we are our true selves, where we feel most comfortable within our own skin. We can find out what it is we're wanting, and we find a way of getting that. We can announce it comfortably, and we are feeling as though it's the right fit for us, as opposed to simply having these thoughts, these ideas, these fantasies, and never being able to find expression to them. It's not to say that we necessarily have to live all of our fantasies, but we might have ways of having greater acceptance of ourselves in having them.
Yeah, acceptance, and then learning how you might communicate that. And I did work with a client on that, and it was amazing because one of the first things they did was tell a partner that they were actually bisexual, and the they weren't sure what the reaction was going to be, but it was actually surprising. And the person also said that they felt that they were bisexual.
Isn't that interesting?
And then it's like, they said to me, it's like, oh my God, why didn't I have this conversation 2 years ago? We wouldn't have had, because it was causing stress for them in the relationship. And it was creating this like huge barrier that was hard to penetrate. Yeah.
You know, I get that also from a lot of people who are in or starting to explore polyam.
Yeah.
That they might have felt as though being monogamous wasn't quite their shtick. It wasn't working so well, but they would have never imagined that their partner would be on board with it. So they just never spoke about it and the whole deal. And then, you know, when they finally do come out in that sense, they're like, wow, like what a relief. Like I can be ethically open about this. I can say what it is and I'm still able to have this, that, and the other thing, or I can choose whatever I want. But that they feel as though they are in a better position, a better fit for what it is that really speaks to them, as opposed to it being more feeling as though they can't do it, they don't do it, even though it's still on their map, on their radar, on their fantasy list. So,
yeah, so it's why in our program that we developed, our multiple loves method, we included this stuff around identity and like discovering this about you, and it's something that we work with people when we first start. It's usually the place, along with limiting beliefs, that we start.
Yeah, to get clarity on identifying ourselves so we can communicate it to others and find out what it is we're wanting and how to get it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So wow, that we talked a lot about a lot today. That was a great topic.
We're out of time.
Yeah, we're totally out of time. We've spoken over an hour, but want to invite, if you ever, I hope you enjoyed this. Let us know in the comments. If you want to talk more about this, keep the chat going. And if you are having trouble or feeling stuck with this or other things, you know, we are here to support you. This community is here to support you. You're not alone. We never want people to feel alone in this.
Never alone.
And never alone. You're never alone.
We're watching you.
Well, we want to create, this is why we created this community, because it's about love and finding people. You're finding your people, man. These are people.
Yeah, an inclusive, non-judgmental, loving community. Absolutely. But you're absolutely right. Let's talk about it, right?
Yeah.
Whether you speak to an awesomeness coach like yourself or a psychotherapist like me, whoever it is, let's continue talking about it. Let's get dialogue, right? Communication, communication, communication.
Awesome. Well, thanks for listening. We'll put the links to connect with us are in the welcome video, but we'll drop them in this chat as well. But you can also just send us a message and we can figure it out for you.
And you know, before we end, I want to say thank you to you, because you're a great coach for me. You really have opened my eyes to many different ways of thinking, and you do help challenge my limiting beliefs. So I thank you for that. I sincerely do. You've taught me a lot.
Thank you for being so open and honest with me about how you feel, and, you know, like showing me what's inside, because I enjoy that about you. It's what's special about you. And it's definitely part of what I love about you.
Awesome. All right. There you go.
All right, everybody. Enough from us. Talk to you soon. Talk to you next Monday. And
Put your comments. What should we talk about for C?
C.
Let's see.
Let's see what happens with C.
All right.
Thanks again, everybody.